welcome to Straight to the Point, a special production by the Public Broadcasting Corporation of Jamaica, PBCJ. I'm Carol Francis. Now, Jamaicans go to the polls on September 3. A general election gives people the right to select their own government. Jamaica's electoral system has matured and is far removed from those days of deep-rooted distrust, due in part to a number of changes, including the establishment of the Electoral Advisory Committee and the group Citizens Action for Free and Fair Elections, CAFFE. With us today is chairman of CAFFE and an advisor to the National Debates Commission, Dr. Lloyd Barnett. Now, Dr. Barnett, before we go anywhere, can you tell me what is the role of Citizens Action for Free and Fair Election, CAFFE?
There's already been implied in what you stated. CAFFE was formed for the specific purpose of assisting in the monitoring of elections to ensure that the elections were conducted in a free and fair manner, and that voters were free from fear, which is the hallmark of the democratic process. And CAFFE also seeks to assist in reforms of the electoral system to strengthen it so that democracy may be preserved and the right to vote enhanced.
The general election is to be held on September 3. We're currently in a COVID-19 pandemic as well as bracing for the hurricane season. If, God forbid, there is a spike in COVID-19 or a hurricane, can the elections be put off, and for how long?
Well, the elections can be put off in the case of a pandemic for up to 30 days. This is an unprecedented situation. We have never had that since we have had universal adult suffrage. So that it will pose very serious challenges if the incidents were to increase dramatically, or even more dramatically than it has been increasing in the last 48 hours. But the conduct of the elections is so important to the democratic process that the authorities will need to seek to work out the best way to overcome the problem. One of the things may be to have more polling stations so that there's a greater spread of persons over the particular areas and less congestion and longer hours. So that I think we have to be very flexible because we're dealing with an unprecedented situation.
What happens if there's a hurricane?
It can be postponed. We have had weather disturbances that have resulted in elections in a particular area or constituency be adjourned until another day. So that is not as great a problem as a pandemic in relation to the conduct of the elections.
Now, free and fair elections are the foundation of every healthy democracy. Problems that prevent an election from being free and fair takes various forms. One such is the issue of vote buying. Every time an election is called, there are rumors of corruption, vote buying, or people using money to win votes. Is there any validity to this rumor?
I think there's been a good deal of concern about things like the spending of large sums of money on ordinary works, which could be done at any time and which is concentrated in the immediate pre-election period. There is the question of how money is distributed among election workers or so-called election workers at election time. So there's been a good deal of concern about the extent to which the process is corrupted in that way.
Are there any penalties for this, if there is in fact something happened?
And, there have always been penalties for corruption, and there is a more developed system of campaign finance monitoring, which is exercised through the Electoral Commission, and that requires specific accounting for what is spent, limitations on what is spent, limitations on donations and the documenting of donations.
Okay, another problem that prevents an election from being free and fair is tampering with the election mechanism. Is there a need to be concerned about this here in Jamaica?
No, I think we have developed a fairly good and efficient system for the taking and the recording of votes. And because we have a system in which you have party scrutineers, as well as independent scrutineers, which is where CAFFE comes in, then the actual process in the voting booths or in the polling station is supervised by independent persons.
An area of concern, Dr. Barnett, is the youth vote. By youth, I mean the persons between the ages of 18 and 24 years. In Jamaica, our youth constitute more than half of the population. However, they participate less than older citizens in formal political processes like elections. Now, let me just read to you some of the findings of a survey that was conducted in 2015 by the Department of Government at the University of the West Indies Mona campus. And it says that although 50% of those interviewed thought it was absolutely important that the country be governed democratically, only 41% of those 18 years and over were registered voters. And a further analysis of the dynamics of youth political engagement in Jamaica indicates that general elections do not inspire many young people. And when asked why is it that they did not feel inclined to vote, the responses included lack of trust in political representatives, fear of political victimization, and lack of confidence in the capabilities of political leaders to provide opportunities, and a general belief that their voice does not count anyway. Is this of concern to CAFFE?
Yes, it is of concern to CAFFE, but what we would say first of all is that you cannot reform a system by keeping away from it. You must get involved and take part in the reform and see that the conduct which you consider to be appropriate is a conduct which becomes the norm. CAFFE has been very concerned about this, and for that reason, CAFFE has been adopting an initiative called Democracy in Schools, in which we establish democracy clubs in schools, which means we engage students in the study of the democratic process, how they can participate and influence what is done. But it has to be recognized that governments are elected by the people, and the people must demand that the governments respond to their needs.
How many schools are these democracy clubs in, and what kind of numbers are we talking about? And is this at the high school level we're talking about, right?
This is at the high school level. We have just started. We have contacted hundreds of schools, and we are just about to launch when we got into the problem of the pandemic. The pandemic seems to affect everything, and so we have not been able to carry it forward. But quite a lot of students have expressed interest, and as soon as we get over this immediate problem, we will proceed with the establishment of the clubs. You might know that in the recent elections, the majority of the volunteers who monitored the election process on behalf of CAFFE were in fact high school students.
So it's not a lack of interest, but a lack of being motivated. So I'm glad to hear about the democracy clubs. Now, the other thing I want to know about is, what is the role of CAFFE on election day?
On election day, we monitor, that is, we observe what the process that is adopted is and whether it conforms with best practices and the legal requirements. We do that in two main ways. We have internal monitors that are indoor observers who sit within the polling station and observe whether the process is in accordance with the legal requirements, as well as we have roving observers who visit the polling stations and the entire area to see that everything is being conducted appropriately. And they make detailed reports. At mid-morning, they make a report on how things have been going. and we have a data center which collects the data so that by midday we can issue an assessment of how matters have been going. And at the end of the day, we issue another brief statement on our assessment of election day, and then eventually we do a more detailed report.
Is this an island-wide focus, or are you concentrating on communities that are, or seats that are close, marginal seats, or areas that are contentious?
On this particular occasion, we have adopted a strategy, or are seeking to implement a strategy of concentrating on marginal seats. We want to be present in all constituencies, but we want to be particularly present in marginal constituencies, since those affect the ultimate result of the elections more than the others. And so that is the strategy we are adopting.
The marginal constituencies, could you tell me some of those constituencies?
Well, there are about 15 of them. I don't want to say too much because we never tell people where we are going to be. Only the electoral office knows where we will be. But there are at least 15.
What happens after the polls are closed?
After the polls are closed, the presiding officer in each polling station counts the ballots. The ballot boxes are opened and the ballot paper is taken out and counted in the presence of the scrutineers of the political parties, the CAFFE observer, and other members of the public. This is one of the provisions of the law which requires that the public, representatives of the ordinary public, be invited to participate by observing the counting. And so the votes are counted, tallied, and a tally sheet is prepared which sets out the results. And that means that 3 or 4 people, in addition to the election officers, would see what the result is at that polling station. And that is a great safeguard against tampering with the votes after they have left the polling stations.
There are normally concerns, and you always hear sometimes, oh, it's a spoiled ballot, or oh, it's a rejected ballot. Are they the same?
No, a spoiled ballot is one which is improperly marked before it is put in the box. And so the person, because of the fact that they made an error, that is one reason it will be treated as a spoiled ballot and is then destroyed or put in the spoiled ballot envelope. The rejected ballot is regularly cast, put in the box, and then at the time of counting, because the mark doesn't indicate clearly in whose favor it is, or it has more than one mark, or more than one candidate, then it is rejected because legally it has no validity.
Is CAFFE only operational in Jamaica, Dr. Barnett?
Well, CAFFE is a Jamaican organization. I do not know of any other country which has so extensive a civic monitoring organization. There are others with monitoring organizations, and sometimes, of course, they invite foreign groups to participate. But CAFFE is uniquely Jamaican. When in 1997 we were formed, you remember that? You're too young to remember the Carter, the Carter Center.
Yeah.
Under President Carter had sent a deputation here, and when they observed how CAFFE had acted, and that was at the very beginning, they were very satisfied. And so at the next election, they said they did not have to come because CAFFE could carry out the mission successfully.
It makes you feel good to know that here in Jamaica, we do things the right way and it is recognized worldwide. And the reason I asked about you being operational only in Jamaica is because I think you were involved recently in the elections in Guyana.
But what we did was to issue appeals that they should seek to observe the proper legal requirements and not let the situation devolve or descend into a chaotic situation as it threatened to be. And I'm glad that eventually good sense prevailed and that the matter was properly dealt with.
Now, Dr. Barnett, with the electoral office becoming more organized and the fact that there is now a political ombudsman and all the protocols and procedures to make sure we have elections that are free and fair and free from fear, What is the future of CAFFE?
Well, we will continue as long as the public thinks we're performing a good job and a useful task. We will continue, and so we appeal to young persons to become involved, because they must continue the project, continue, take over and carry the ball. And we're appealing to them to volunteer, because we still need volunteers for this election, so that they can get in touch with us, and we will certainly train them and have them ready for election day.
Thank you so very much. Our guest on Straight to the Point, Dr. Lloyd Barnett, Chairman of Citizens Action for Free and Fair Election, CAFFE, and also an advisor to the National Debates Commission, and Carol Francis. Pleasant viewing.